Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Reclaim's Network Plus webinar series. So Reclaim Network Plus webinar series is actually one of the activities of Reclaim Network Plus, and Reclaim project is actually funded by UKRI, which is UK Research and Innovation Funding. It is made of three councils, APSRC, NERC, and AHRC. And Reclaim has got four partners, which is Bangor University, UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, Warwick University, and University of Bath. And it is led by Global Centre for Clean Air Research, University of Surrey. Next slide, please. So these four partners of the UK Reclaim are led by Professor Prashant from University of Surrey, Lawrence Jones from UKCH, Niria from Warwick, and Professor Sheila from Bangor, and Thomas from Bath, with Charlotte, who is like helping us in presentation today as project officer, and Mark as network manager, who has left the network now, but someone will be joining. Next slide, please. So this Reclaim Network webinar series actually happens every month at the same time, which is 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday. So this is 41st webinar of the long webinar series. So Reclaim started in actually March 2022, and we have reached long ahead. Like this is, and it will run until February 2026. This network, and hopefully will continue with other project support like greening and other future projects. And you can also see all our past presentation from our speakers on a YouTube channel. So Reclaim has a YouTube channel where if you're interested, you can see what other speakers had said. So in Reclaim webinar series, we have generally speakers from policy, industry, and academia, and they present their research on green infrastructure or blue infrastructure, how they are used for natural resilience building against climate change or air pollution. So in natural GBGI solution for urban resilience. Next slide, please. Reclaim. Until now, we have more than 700 members who have joined this Network Plus Reclaim network, and they come from different backgrounds. For example, public health. These are the different backgrounds here. Planning, and in Reclaim we have different activities, which we like 7 funded projects, synthesis, workshops, and webinar series is one of them. So we have around 40 webinar series, and then engagement. Next slide, please. So in today's webinar, we have two fantastic presenters. First one is Dr. Amy Phillips. She is lecturer in environmental planning from University of Manchester, and her talk is about CoolSchools nature-based climate action from schools to cities. And second one is Dr. Rana Moustafa. She is researcher at GCARE, University of Surrey, and her topic of presentation is urban greening, how to use toolkit for local authorities, council, and officers. So when they are presenting their presentation, all joiners or attendees are requested, or they can ask question and answer by pressing Q&A button on top of their screen. Next slide, please.
That's it.
That's it. So I'll start with the short biography of Amy. So telling about Amy, first speaker of this webinar series. Amy is a lecturer in environmental planning at University of Manchester. Her research specializes in urban green inequalities, exploring the ways in which access to green space varies across social groups and spaces. Using participatory approaches, she examines how urban greening can support just transition to more sustainable and inclusive cities. Her work thus far has explored access to green spaces, public preferences for green city street greening, as well as scenarios for green cities of tomorrow. Over to you, Amy, now. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction. I'll have a go at sharing my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so many thanks again for the introduction and for the invitation from the Reclaim Network to come and present to you today. As was said, my name is Amy Phillips. I'm a lecturer in environmental planning at the University of Manchester. However, the research that I'm going to present to you today is from work I did in my previous institution at the Free University of Brussels in Belgium. And that was in a project called CoolSchools, which was interested in looking at nature-based climate action from schools to cities. So as I'm sure many of you know, green and blue infrastructure provides people with a range of mental and physical health benefits. And for children in particular, this can play an important role in childhood development. So research has shown that children who have more exposure to nature are more physically active, have better balance and motor coordination, show increased concern for nature later in life, have stronger neighborhood social cohesion, and fewer behavioral and social problems, just to name a few of the benefits that access to nature provides to children. However, despite this litany of benefits, we also see that urban children are spending increasingly less time in nature, particularly in developed countries. And we also see that access to green in cities is unequal, with poorer neighborhoods tending to have less access. So given these two challenges, many cities around the world are putting forward agendas to increase children's access to high quality green spaces. So this is where the CoolSchools project came in. CoolSchools was really interested in this school environment, which is a context that has been quite understudied. This was a Horizon 2020 project with the aim of analyzing the multiple co-benefits of implementing nature-based solutions for climate adaptation, or so-called nature-based climate shelters, in and around school environments. The project, which finished in February of this year, involved 4 cities, so Rotterdam in the Netherlands, Brussels, Belgium, Paris, France, and Barcelona in Spain. And these are all cities in which some kind of greening, schoolyard greening project had occurred or was ongoing. And so we were able to kind of integrate this process of schoolyard greening into some of our analyses. And although this research took place in these 4 continental European contexts, it's certainly relevant for the UK context as well, where 3/4 of children want more time in nature, according to a survey from National Trust published last year. But at the same time, nearly 2/3 of parents are only able to take their children to nature spaces once a week or less. There are also inequities in children's access to green spaces in the UK. So, for example, students at top private schools have 10 times more green space than state pupils. And research also shows that in the UK, deprived areas are found to have less and poorer quality green space. So this is absolutely an agenda that is relevant for the UK as well. So the aim of the CoolSchools project was really to try to develop an evidence base about the multiple co-benefits of nature-based climate school shelters. So in order to do that, we looked at a number of different facets of these co-benefits. So we had colleagues looking at biodiversity practices, cognitive and behavioral development of children in green versus less green schoolyards, important characteristics that contribute to greater feelings of safety in green schoolyards, how to govern these spaces in inclusive ways, how to better integrate the schoolyard and surrounding green spaces into education. But the work that I was involved in Brussels, together with some colleagues, Francesca Barrault and Elsa Gallet, was work on accessibility and equity. So that's what I'm going to focus on for the rest of the presentation. And the work that I'm going to present to you today aimed to respond to 3 main research questions. So the first was, to what extent do children use public green spaces around their school on weekdays, after school hours? This is something we simply didn't really know before this research. Second, to what extent is children's use of public green spaces during weekdays associated with the characteristics and the location of those spaces, as well as household characteristics? And finally, what are the main enablers and barriers that children experience to using public green spaces on weekdays after school hours? So as I mentioned, this research took place in the Brussels capital region. Brussels is, of course, the capital of Belgium. It's a relatively green city, so 52% of the regional surface cover is vegetated, and this amounts to approximately 25 square meters per inhabitant of accessible green space, which is very high. However, these numbers are quite inflated due to the presence of a large forest in the southeast of the region. And in fact, the center of the region is quite deprived when it comes to vegetation cover. And this also is the poorest region of the city. So again, this question of kind of equity and green comes up here. And this correlates as well, or is rather corroborated with research that a colleague of mine, Elsa Gallet, did, where she looked at the green and blue infrastructure coverage around schools in the 4 CoolSchools cities. And what she found was that 93% of primary schools have less than 30% green and blue infrastructure cover within a 300-meter buffer. And 30% is really this kind of international standard that cities should aim to reach. So the vast majority of schools were not meeting those standards. In Brussels and Rotterdam, she found that greener schools tended to be more affluent schools, while in Paris and Barcelona it was the opposite. So it's important to also note that this is not a kind of ubiquitous relationship, but very much depends on a city's sort of historical development patterns. So in order for us to study how children use public green spaces, we use what is called a map-based survey. So map-based surveys, along with your typical survey questions like multiple choice questions, open answer questions, they allow us to collect spatially explicit information. So I have an example here from a service called Maptionnaire, from a campus in Australia, where students were asked to put a point where they had positive experiences on campus and where they'd had negative experiences on campus. And in addition to putting those points down, they could write a little bit about why that experience was positive or negative. And so this would allow all kinds of interesting spatial analyses to understand, for example, who is having positive experiences and critically where. And then I think you can see how that might lead to very tangible action by, in this case, a university or a city, a region, etc. So our survey, we disseminated our survey to parents and guardians of primary school age children. In our survey, we asked parents to tell us about how often their children use public green spaces, both during the weekday after school hours, but also on weekends. We asked them to tell us where those spaces were located, so by placing a point on the map, but then also indicating whether that green space was located nearby their home, nearby their child's school, or both, and what kind of enablers and barriers their child faces in using public green spaces. So we received 418 usable responses to our survey, representing 192 schools in the region. So let's jump into some of the main results. We found that 40% of children did regularly visit green spaces nearby their school after school hours, which is quite a lot more than we expected. It seems that these spaces do play an important role in children's sort of weekly, day-to-day green space exposure. However, we did find pretty significant differences in frequency of use, which was associated with a number of things. So for example, we found that frequency of green space use was associated with the location of the space visited. So for example, if people only visit, or children rather only visit green spaces located that are located both close to home and school, they'll most likely visit that space several times a week. So roughly half of those children would visit them several times a week, as compared to only around a quarter of those who visited green spaces close to home or close to school only. So what does this mean? It essentially means that if you live close to your school, you will visit green spaces more often. We hypothesize that is because if you are visiting a school that's much further away from your home, you'll probably take the car or perhaps public transport, which leaves much less opportunity to bump into a green space and spend some time there. We also found that frequency of use was associated with income, and in particular, we saw that lower income was associated with more frequent use, which is in fact the opposite of what we typically see in green space research. It tends to be wealthier people who use green spaces more often, but we seem to, or the findings seem to show that these spaces are very important for lower income groups. And very clear results with regard to gender and age as well. So we divided our respondents into younger and older respondents, so 3 to 5 being younger and 6 to 12 being older, and male and female. And here we see a very clear sort of stepwise decrease in frequency of use between younger and older children, and also between male and female children, with over 50% of older females saying that they use green spaces after school only once a month or seldom. In terms of the characteristics of the spaces used, we see that green spaces that are visited close to school tend to be smaller and less vegetated. And that, again, it is those smaller spaces that tend to be used more often after school hours. So things like, for example, pocket parks, which again maybe has to do with people's trajectories between home and school, or the likelihood of having, you know, a large green space next to you versus a small green space next to you. And finally, in terms of the barriers that children experience to using green space, the most obvious one was a lack of time, as reported by parents, as well as lack of available and attractive green spaces surrounding home and school, whereas things like concerns about safety, accidents, dirtiness, and allergies tended to be less commonly reported. So, so to conclude, we do see that many children make regular use of green spaces after school hours, and that lower income is associated with more frequent use of these spaces. We see that older children and girls in particular are less frequently using these spaces, with lack of time and accessible and attractive green spaces available, tending to be the kind of biggest barrier. I think bringing this back to the broader context of Cool Schools, it's, you know, we can start to think about how better integrating nature-based learning in schools, both in terms of, you know, greening schoolyards, greening the curricula, so encouraging use of these spaces for teaching and learning, how that can perhaps supplement this after-school use, and particularly try to make up for some of those inequities that we identified. And so just to give an example, quite a lot of research has shown that green schoolyards can lead to greater gender equity. So this is a quote from a colleague of mine, Natalie Blanc, who worked on the Cool Schools project. And she writes that previously it was the boys who occupied most of the space for ball games, while girls were often confined to the margins. While creating different areas in the playground helps to reduce gender inequalities in the use of space. So again, taking away or decentering the sports pitch, you know, in the schoolyard has been shown to lead to greater gender equity, and particularly if, you know, we can integrate nature into those spaces. And finally, just to give you again also a bit of more of a taste of some of the work that we were doing in the Cool Schools project. I worked together with Elsa Gallet on research on school staff and the barriers that they face to integrating nature-based learning into their courses, both in terms of sort of availability of spaces to do that, so having green spaces nearby, having a green schoolyard, but also in terms of learnings. And so Elsa did some really interesting interviews with teachers in schools in Brussels, and have just one indicative quote here from a director who says that in my formal training as a teacher, no one ever talked to me about outdoor teaching. I've never done a lesson in nature. I've never observed a lesson in nature, and not a single teacher in high school talked to us about that. So it's the unknown for teachers. So, you know, it's all well and good to say that we need to increase the time that children are spending in nature during school hours, but there has to be support for school staff to enable that. And one of the things we came up with in this Cool Schools project was a toolkit for teachers to better integrate nature-based learning. So that's everything for me today. I look forward to your questions later, but otherwise, please feel free to get in touch. That's my email there. The QR code will direct you to the final report from the Cool Schools project. And please also, feel free to visit our website. So thank you very much for your attention. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Amy, for nice presentation. It was really interesting. I have some questions, so I'll ask later on. I hope some people will also have some questions. Now, coming to second presentation of today's webinar series. Second web presentation is from Rana. With 15 years of professional experience and a PhD in environmental engineering from University of Surrey, Rana is committed to realizing a greener future for our planet. From co-founding a solar energy company to orchestrating a key environmental project at leading multinational corporation, her experiences span diverse sectors. In academia, her contribution traverses various fields such as wastewater management, air pollution, transport, and health, fortifying her capacity to deliver unparalleled environment and climate change consulting services to ministries, agencies, and MDBs. She is committed member of the GCARE research team and currently consults for the World Bank Group. Welcome, Rana, and over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeet. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Today I'm going to talk to you about our urban greening how-to toolkit for local authorities, councils, and officers. Basically, this toolkit takes all the work, the valuable work achieved by the Reclaim Network Plus, and puts it in a format that is digestible and that would aid decision makers into using urban greening in cities. So next slide. As we all probably have felt that cities suffer from a lot of urban challenges. These are just some highlights. Air pollution results in 8.8 million premature deaths globally. There's a considerable decline in wildlife since 1970 of 73%. There has been a very felt heat waves across cities and in Europe, especially in the UK, reaching a high of 40.3 degrees Celsius in 2022. Of course, these issues result in costs and pressure on infrastructure due to flooding and the impact on healthcare. Next slide. We've structured the, before we talk about the structure, urban greening utilizes nature-based solutions, which are basically capture the services achieved by natural ecosystems and integrate them within urban infrastructure to provide a more healthy, stable, and biodiverse environment for city inhabitants and urban dwellers. Next slide. So this was a group effort, as you see, a very long list of co-authors, and that we would like to acknowledge and thank for their commitment and their contributions to the how-to toolkit. Next is the entities. Next slide. As you can see, so many reputable and interesting entities who are really invested in bringing forward a forward-facing document that would really put science to work. Next slide. So the how-to toolkit for decision makers has a vision, which is to have a healthier, more prosperous, and climate resilient neighborhoods or environments, to support local authorities and decision makers to help in their planning, retrofitting, and enhancing the surrounding environments for urban dwellers. This toolkit was developed as a result of engagement with the target audience by taking their inputs and incorporating their feedback to have this toolkit to be most usable and helpful for the user or the target audience. The focus areas, it was designed around 7 fact sheets. Each fact sheet maps to one of the major urban challenges. These are air pollution in the alphabetical order. Air pollution, so it focuses on air pollution mitigation, biodiversity enhancement, flood mitigation, enhancing health and well-being and considering it, heat mitigation, noise mitigation, and storing carbon. So I'll go briefly into each of these fact sheets. This is just an example of how each fact sheet is designed. First, we discuss the challenge of, for example, air pollution, and then how does urban greening contribute to the mitigation of the challenge, which is in the case air pollution. Then a list of recommended actions which are actionable and supported by scientific facts. Finally, there's some further insights and references if the reader would like to explore more. First, air pollution. So in these slides, I'll be just touching upon the key findings and proposed solutions. So key findings for air pollution, as we mentioned, the staggering amount of premature deaths caused by air pollution, and it's also the economic stress air pollution puts on the healthcare costs, and the benefit of having trees in alleviating those costs in the UK was saved around £163 million in 2017. The solutions are based on scientific research. For example, hedges on roadsides have reduced pollution by up to 63%. Green screens around schools reduced PM by 44%. Street trees reduced as much as 50% in open road conditions. It also stresses upon certain considerations to take, like, for example, the type of plant species, that they are stress tolerant, non-invasive, non-allergic, and so on. Then biodiversity enhancement. Of course, urbanization compromises biodiversity by causing habitat loss and fragmentation. Proposed solutions is, for example, to prioritize ground level green infrastructure like gardens and parks versus green roofs, because they have been proven to have better biodiversity. Also, wildflower meadows and spontaneous vegetation support higher insect diversity versus more better designed landscaping. Reducing mowing and avoiding pesticides and fertilizers is also recommended. Having less islands or more connectivity between the green spaces would help cross-pollination and a diversity of species. Floods, the presence of urban infrastructure affects the hydrological cycle, causing disruptions and high peak flows that would lead to, I think, Charlotte, we are in flood mitigation, and the other way. Yeah, so it's recommended that we use sustainable drainage systems, like permeable pavements, rain gardens, employ modeling tools to predict the runoff and design accordingly, have better drainage networks. Moving on, health and well-being. It has been noted that the mental health issues, obesity, and chronic diseases have been linked to urban living as compared to rural residents. For example, in the UK, 64% of urban residents have reported mental health concerns. We encourage decision makers and local councils to provide accessible green-blue spaces within 15 minutes walk for all residents, as highlighted by Amy in her presentation. It's also important to encourage unstructured play for children and ensure equity and access to such areas, especially in the private areas. And also promote the role of nature in therapy and community co-design. Moving on to heat mitigation, of course, we all feel the impact of how summers are getting unbearably hot due to climate change, and the role of urban greening is very felt in heat mitigation, where parks, trees, trees in the streets, wetlands, ponds, and so on can lower temperatures by 8.8 degrees Celsius. Green roofs and green walls can reduce the heat by absorption and reducing energy demand. This needs to be prioritized in heat vulnerable regions using mapping tools. and so on. Moving on to noise mitigation, it has been reported by the WHO that noise mitigation is a real threat to human health, causing hearing loss, cardiovascular diseases, poor sleep, and stress. It's proposed that, for example, the impact of trees, tree belts as wide as 25 meters can reduce road noise by up to 7 decibels. Dense hedges are also quite effective. The role of water, blue infrastructure like fountains and lakes and so on also reduces noise and improves psychological well-being. Last one is storing carbon. Storing carbon is so soil sealing and disturbance reduce carbon storage that are common in urban areas. However, there's large potential of carbon storing in cities, like in UK cities, 82% of carbon stored in soils, which is high potential. This should encourage tree planting in parks and woodlands to increase carbon sinks, as well as the importance of protecting the health of soils and reducing soil disturbances. So we can put together some key takeaways. Or the toolkit ends on a note of summarizing key takeaways from the different challenges. For example, for pollution is to use plant species or choose plant species and green infrastructure wisely to fit the conditions. Be mindful of actual design and layouts of streets. Be mindful that green spaces or gardens are biodiversity hotspots and to treat them as such. The importance of balancing between nature and built surfaces is important in maintaining a balanced hydrological cycle to reduce the risk of flooding. Health and well-being is important for both physical and psychological health, and it should be seen as a right, or so everyone should have equitable access. Urban heat is also an important aspect to make cities more livable and reduce the risk of heat stress. Finally, noise mitigation is also quite important in choosing the right types of plants and placing them in places which are of high noise impact. Moving on, with the role of community engagement and inclusion has been considered in this toolkit, and the toolkit also promotes it. For example, ensuring equal access to green spaces within 15 minutes of 15-minute walk for everyone. It's supported by the co-design of communities, and it's also urban spaces have proven to strengthen social coherence through shared green projects. The impacts of the toolkit are seen, next slide, are seen to incorporate practical side because they are clear and to the point. Social, they provide healthier, more inclusive aspects. Policy, they can be used as to support policy papers. Finally, obviously, a better environment, cleaner environment for everyone. Our next steps for the toolkit are to publish it and widely disseminate it, and we're actually also putting together a front-facing or a forward-facing video that would summarize the key findings of or key highlights of the how-to toolkit. So the call to action is that once it's published, please download it, share it with your community, and take part in realizing the importance of urban greening in your communities. So that's it for me. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Rana, for the presentation. Now I will ask question if attendees have put any questions for you guys. So I can't see any question on my screen. Charlotte, do we have any question which is there?
Not right now. I think you had one for Amy. I'll let you know if any comes through, okay?
Oh yeah, so could you ask that question, because I can't see it?
No, we don't have any at the minute, but if there's any that comes through,
Okay.
I'll let you know.
Okay. So I'll ask question to Amy first. How many years was your project for? The
It was a 3-year project.
3-year project. And did you also check the percentage of greenness without the south part? You showed the Brussels cities, and because you said that the south part was very green, so it actually disproportionate the area of greenness. So did you actually see how much was the greenness without considering the south part?
So in terms of in our analyses, when we calculated green, so we'd either do that based on a buffer around the schools, in which case we wouldn't want to exclude this forest because it would, I mean, if there's a school next to the forest, they're benefiting from its presence. And otherwise, we just looked at the greenness, the vegetation cover within the schoolyard as well. So none of our analyses excluded that. But for example, you often have this figure, as I mentioned, 25 square meters of accessible green per inhabitant. But if you look at the city center, this area that I said is quite deprived, it's more like 1 square meter. So there's a very big distribution range of accessible green in Brussels.
Yeah, why I asked you, because when you compare with different schools, and you can actually see what is the deprivation rate and comparison with different schools. That's what my question. So one last question I would ask is, what is the major recommendation would you like to give from your work?
And I think the major recommendation is green schoolyards as much as possible, and integrate green visits into school curricula as much as possible. But I think that requires a very strong support system for teachers, for parents, for administrators, for directors, because it can be quite a battle to change curricula, especially for older children. What I've heard from people, so this is not part of the research I showed, but what I've heard from quite a lot of people is that we may have quite some green education, nature-based education built into the younger years, but once children get to those older years, young adults, it all but disappears. And so I think that for me, also in terms of research that I like to continue after CoolSchools, seems like a critical gap, because it's those young people as well that are just on the cusp of becoming adults, and we need to keep that that care for green, that interaction with green going, and not just assume that doing it at the youngest years will then lead to environmental stewardship later in life as well. So that's, I think, green more, which is obviously always going to be the case, but do it in a way where you recognize that lots of people are going to need a lot of support to really make it successful.
So green more and include greening curricula in school. That's the conclusion. Yeah. Thank you very much, Amy. That's it. And now I have a few questions to Rana. First one is this toolkit. How many references have you used this in this toolkit?
So for each fact sheet, we have between 5 and 19 times 7.
So yeah, around 20,
maybe
150,
yeah.
less than 150 references. And is this toolkit applicable in UK scenario only, or is it applicable in over the world scenario?
So we focused on the UK. It's targeted at UK local councils. However, I see that it could be applicable elsewhere.
Okay, so because it's basically on UK, so I would also like to ask you in the end, what is the biggest challenge you see in the UK scenario, and how this toolkit, because you have several challenges here. So of course, one challenge can be more critical than the other. So in your thinking, what will be the biggest solution you think from all the recommendation you have given for all the 7 or 8 co-benefits of GPGI? What is lacking in UK scenario, and how we can just focus on one? Is, for example, a policymaker asks, what toolkit gives you so many solutions, and what is your the best one? Which one would you say?
Which fact sheet would be most worthy of focus, you mean?
I mean, if you have facts, it has lots of solution you have said for different co-benefits of GBGI, and you said this is UK based scenario. So out of UK, what which of the solution you say in your terms, in your thinking, is this is the most important thing we must do in UK?
I would say is to hold on to green spaces, ensure that there's less landscaping and more and allow for more nature or like meadows and so on. And integrate in the design of buildings and in retrofitting buildings, not to take away green spaces but to add to them. So it's just make sure that you hold on to this aspect in the development of cities.
Thank you very much. So I will just summarize what two our speakers gave in recommendation for today's webinar. First one is cool our schools as much as we can, and second is bring schooling curricula in school. And second one is, as Rana suggests, just bring greenery everywhere as possible, not just parks and green, but also try to retrofit in our buildings. Thank you very much, both the speakers.
I had a couple of questions as well. One was for Amy. Do you have what was the easiest green infrastructure that you believe the schools can do? Because not everybody can build a park near their school. So what's the easiest thing that a school could do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it very much depends on the school. I think what a lot of schools end up doing is having some kind of vegetable garden. And of course, then there's quite a lot of potential to get children involved. And I think the learning potential of that is perhaps a bit clearer for teachers as well. So that could be one great entry way. But I think whatever you do manage to do, whether that's planting a few flowers or a bush, get children involved in that as well. It's a great way for them to learn and start thinking about their connection with the natural world.
Perfect, thanks. And the other one for Rana was, what's the response been of this toolkit from councils?
We found a lot of interest and engagement, honestly, with the co-authors and the councils who are also co-authors. So I'm optimistic and confident that it would be of use to them.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah, please feel free to write in Q&A.
There's one from Jenny. She's working for a research hub that is studying health benefits of low carbon transport. We understand that active travelers gain benefits from access through greener space on a regular basis. What are the panelists' thoughts on this from their research?
I'm happy to chip in here.
Yep.
So I haven't done any kind of direct research on this per se, but I have done research on access to green space, and I did some research where I spoke with residents of Brussels, and one thing that they said to me is, when they visit a green space, often the trip from the green space to their house is quite a gray trip, and they feel that can undo some of the benefits that they've just gained by being in that green space. So some of the research I have worked on is about greening streets, to create, exactly as you're saying, these kind of green corridors to bring some of those green space benefits out into the rest of the city. It shouldn't be that those benefits have to remain where they are, in those green spaces. I'm not familiar with any particular research that shows this, but I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's interesting research as well about, whether people choose to travel through greener corridors versus less green corridors, even if there's perhaps slight time trade-off with the greener corridor taking more time. I'm not sure if there's research on this, but it could be very interesting. But that's just what comes to mind when I see your question.
From the toolkit perspective, this was a very important aspect in the health and well-being fact sheet, the importance of green spaces in encouraging physical movement. People are more encouraged to ride their bike, go for a walk, go for a run in green spaces. and that's very important for health. And it also reflects on mental health or psychological health.
Thank you. Any more
Thanks.
questions do we have?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, so now then we will tell about next presentation.
Yep.
Thank you both the speakers. Thank you for presenting. In next month's presentation, we have Dr. Elgar Kamjo she's researcher at UCT School of Architecture, Planning and Environment Policy, and her topic of presentation will be what green infrastructure means for the residents of informal settlements in Iran. And second presentation will be from Dr. Tatiana Armijos Moya. She is postdoc in Department of Architecture, Engineering and Technology at TU Delft, and her presentation will be on green climate control, analyzing the impact of active plant-based system on the built environment. So looking forward to another two fantastic presentation in next month. Thank you very much. This is our email and LinkedIn and X, where you can follow Reclaim Network Plus for upcoming news or anything related with Reclaim. Please follow us if you want to. Thank you for joining today in the Reclaim webinar.
Thank you very much. See you next
Thank
month.
you.
Bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.